There's even some studies that have been done that say we can actually do fractions. I wouldn't go fractions quite so far. But what happens is you've probably seen little kids who, they take something and they push it over to the edge of the table and then watch it fall. So that's an experiment with gravity, but it's also an experiment with proportions. And when they've done some studies where they take and they push something to the edge where it should fall but it doesn't, kids are going like, hey, what's going on here? Little kids. And so they've done these, then that prompted them to do these tests where they habituate kids. They show them these proportions, these ratios, and then they basically learn a ratio, and then they show them a different ratio, and they go, well, that's different. And so they're able to recognize ratios and potentially have some understanding of proportionality, even at a very, very young age. And a lot of this stuff is unraveling. We're learning all this stuff. But there's a great foundation. Now, that foundation of innate ability, that's the B. We add to that with our informal experiences, if we do this chronologically. So there's a lot of stuff before kids get to school. There's a lot of stuff that happens to them. And I have two. There's I sub 1 and I sub 2. And I sub 1 is the mathematical stuff, informal experiences that kids have. And that's that intersection of what's the hardware. And it's a variable because it's different for different kids. We're not all born with the same ability to make comparisons. Some can subitize more than others. Some are better at making comparisons as things get closer to one-to-one. We're not all the same kind of built-in stuff. But how that gets expressed and developed is based on our experiences. And so there are mathematical experiences we have early on, like counting. We learn how to count. But not all of us are exposed to the same level of counting. Some of, they do these studies, and it's mostly socioeconomic. The kids from high socioeconomic families, their parents are going, let's count the ducks. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's not happening with all kids. But that kind of thing matters. You learn the numbers. You learn one-to-one correspondence. Playing board games. There's great, really robust research about the value of playing board games with preschool kids. And you think about what happens when you play a board game, a number board game like Chutes and Ladders. You roll a dice. You roll a die. Now you've got a set, 4 dots. And it's like 4 dots. 1, 2, 3, 4. I now have a length representation of those 4 dots. And I have the number symbolic representation of it. And boy, kids are doing that. Kids who are playing those games. And they did a study, 20 minutes a day with preschool kids. And it had a huge impact on their number knowledge and their number sense. And so kids who are doing that, they're loaded. Boy, that's really built. That's like they're ready. Those guys are really getting ready for school. Not everybody has that experience. And the studies they've done, it's very similar to what happens in reading. Kids who come from homes where there's a lot of reading going on, a lot of books, they come to school. They're ready to, they know the alphabetic principle. They know how to use a book. It's the same thing in math. Kids who are doing things like counting place settings, playing board games, playing with blocks and putting things into sets. That's a mathematical concept. Putting all the orange ones together, all the red ones together. I'm organizing things by shape. Kids who have those experiences are developing and building on their mathematical capabilities. We all hopefully have the experience of sharing. That's just one thing that seems to be, most kids seem to come in with a good understanding of half because they've had to share. Now, they may not know a third. They certainly don't know 4/5. Most of them have no concept of a fraction more than 1 of 7/5. Like, where does that come from? I'm always sharing. I'm always getting part of a whole. So, but this also is very important, too, in terms of all these mathematical experiences. And the same thing in reading. There are all these informal experiences we have. We don't have control of them for the most part. Parents do, but in schools we don't. But it has a big impact on how ready those kids are. And then there's these non-mathematical informal experiences that kids have that affects the way they are as learners, that affect the development of their ability to delay gratification, to wait, to not, the marshmallow study? It's a great study. It's where they put a marshmallow down in front of a kid, like a 4-year-old kid, and they said, okay, I got to go, but if you wait until I come back to have the marshmallow, I'll give you 2 of them. And the guy leaves. And the kids, it's great. You watch some of these kids, they're doing this like covering the marshmallow and doing this and doing all kinds of things to try and wait. And there are other kids who are just like, oh, it's gone. And so the kids who were able to wait until the person came back, this is a study they did in like the 50s or 60s. So they went and they looked at these people 40 years later. And the correlation was unbelievable, like close to 1-to-1 in terms of the people who waited were successful in life. And it's an indicator of the early ability to regulate yourself, to say, you know what, I can wait for this. And so that's something that can be developed as you build patience and begin to build executive function, controlling your own emotions, being aware of who you are. And so that ability is huge in terms of being a learner and having perseverance and patience and tenacity, being able to say, I'm going to keep coming back to this. I can wait. There's some, I don't have to have it right now. So these are really important. These are critical, and that's across the board. And it's particularly true in stuff where kids struggle. So if they hit a wall, it's like, forget it. I can't do that. I'm done. So you need to have, this piece is really important. And then you have the experiences that kids have again. If a kid is hungry, there's this really rich research on what they call chronic stress. And it's not the kind of chronic stress that we have because we have so much work to do when we go into the office. It's the kind of chronic stress you have when you're hungry, when your basic needs aren't being met. And that has a chemical effect on how your brain develops. And there's a lot of research that suggests that this hurts kids' working memory, that chronic stress reduces working memory capacity. And working memory is the part you use to figure out stuff. It's the part that sits up in the frontal lobe. When a problem comes in, it's what holds information while you're processing it. And so kids who have a strong working memory tend to have high academic success, and kids who have a low working memory tend to struggle. And kids who come out of a high poverty, high stress environment, that doesn't have to be poverty, it could be just a tough home, tend to have a lower working memory. It's chemical. I mean, when you have stress, cortisol, there's stuff that gets released. It has an impact. They used, I'm trying to remember what the toxic stress is actually a term that they're starting to use to relate it to us. Really, it's a chemical reaction that goes on. So we have the mathematical stuff, this non-mathematical stuff that begin to make up who we are, interacting with what our sort of innate capabilities are.